Hey, everybody, this is Right Angle on BillWhittle.com. I'm Steve Green with Bill Whittle and Scott Ott. And what I like to do this week is sort of a follow-up to my segment from last week, where we talked about how this country tends to put new systems in place, new preparations in place after some big disaster, such as Pearl Harbor or the Korean War or 9/11. And that we tend not to have the same mistake made a second time. At least that's the hope. And what I didn't talk about is what we would actually change after this coronavirus crisis has passed, what we will do differently in the future. I left it as an open question, something to think about. Well, we've had a week to think about it. Now we're done with that, and it's time for some answers. So what I'd like to do is ask each gentleman a two-part question. What, and we'll start with you this week, Scott, what going forward do you want to change in your personal life once you're no longer locked in your own home? And what do you think the country should be doing differently?
Well, I think if I'm no longer going to be locked in my home, the first thing I want to do is take off this ankle bracelet, because this has been a burden to me. You know, they said it was just 7 years, but that is starting to seem like a long time. No, actually, this has been an interesting experience for me. And folks who watched our backstage program know this, that I've actually found it to be refreshing to have my life pattern interrupted. I have a full-time job that I work at a store, but that store had to shut down for at least 2 weeks. And so I'm not going there to clock in. It has... Literally the day I woke up after the last day at that job, I sat down with my little tablet and made a list of things that I would like to do during this hiatus when I'm not there. And I called the list adventure. And I just, I didn't constrain myself but to any particular thing, but just rattled off a whole bunch of things that I'd like to try. And I've already done 4, 5, or 6 of them. And I guess what I'd like to do, Steve, going forward is to be able to take that same spirit of adventure and say, yeah, let's go ahead and do it. I mean, this may sound silly, but we've been talking for a long time, my wife and I, that we should get fishing licenses and go fishing. And then we moved next to a lake and we still didn't do it. We've been living next to this lake for like 9 months or something like that, and we didn't get a fishing license. And so we had no more excuses. And frankly, we thought we might have to eat. And so we went to Walmart and got a couple of cheap fishing poles and some gear and a couple of fishing licenses and spent probably 8 hours over 2 days having a great time out by the water. That may seem trivial, but I realize what a rut of habit I've gotten into, and I'd like to get out of that more often.
Excellent. And as a country, what do you think we should be doing differently, whether it's here at home with our relations abroad?
That on a broad scale, and this is not something that the government can do, but on a broad scale, I think the other thing that comes up in this is the realization that we need to find better ways to talk to each other. We need to find ways to communicate our political ideas that don't necessarily involve demonizing the other party or calling them an idiot or, accusing them of wanting to bring down the entire country. And I'm talking to you both. And I don't mean you guys, but I mean just like the both sides of this issue. It just seems, because I read widely, what I see is a country just tearing itself apart from the inside because we believe on both sides of the political aisle that the worst possible thing we could ever face was that guy who lives next door who doesn't share my political viewpoints. And I think we're finding out that there are worse things. Drowning in your own fluids while you're laying in a hospital is bad. Arguing with your neighbor, not so much. Finding a way to connect with your neighbor so that maybe you can make a friend and possibly earn a hearing and then maybe be persuasive is actually something to be aspired.
Maybe we need to do 2 things, Scott, because I really like your vision, and I'm trying to think of what we could do to further it along. And I'm thinking, number 1, we need to shut down Twitter, and number 2, lock everyone out of their homes for a week.
I'll tell you, I have seen more of my neighbors in this past week than ever before. there are more people outdoors now than there were in the past. People, and now I live in a kind of a funky, cool neighborhood where people actually have clean garages. And the reason why they have clean garages, we don't have one yet, but the reason why they have clean garages is because they sit out in the garage at night and have little garage parties with their barbecue and drink a beer and smoke a cigar and talk to their friends and play a little music. So, that is normally happening here, but people are out running and biking. And I saw the guy across the street took his little 3-year-old down to the lake to go fishing. There's just a lot more presence of people in public in our neighborhood than there ever was before. And I like that.
Yeah, it's awful nice. The weather hasn't been nice enough for us to tackle our garage yet, which we do every spring. Just spring here on Monument Hill is kind of wet and ugly and colder than you'd like. But our kitchen junk drawer, which is huge, and up until a couple of days ago, looked like the aftermath of a Puerto Rican hurricane, now looks like it just got a week-long visit from the anal retentive chef. I had a very productive Saturday. All right, Bill, same pair of questions to you. What do you want to change in your personal life after this is over? And what would you change the way we conduct ourselves as a country?
Well, in terms of my personal life, I took a pretty big hit with this. I was just a few days when the virus hit. I was just a few days short of opening up my my nationwide chain of fast food bat taco franchise, and that didn't go well. Bat on a stick is on hold for the indefinite future. Pretty upset about that, if you really want to know.
Yeah,
I thought the timing there was poor.
That's some good guano.
When things settle down, I think the bat on the stick is going to be popular, but we'll worry about that later.
Yeah.
What's interesting about this, Steve, is I think probably more on a personal level than a professional level. I just did a little math in my head, and fortunately it was multiplying by 10, so I was able to pull it off. We've been doing this show for well over 10 years now, but just assume that we did it for 10 years. We do it every week. It's 52 weeks a year. That's 520 tapings, more than that, probably pushing 600 by now. And every now and then I'm just struck by the fact that the three of us have been in the same physical space maybe 3 or 4 times total in the course of the 10 years. This telecommuting thing is stuff that the three of us do on a weekly basis, and that Scott and I do on a many
almost
times a
daily,
week basis. Yeah, pretty near daily. And it becomes second nature. So I think a lot of Americans are starting to experience that now. They're starting to experience working from home and putting aside all of the social pressure and all of the stress with the virus. I think a lot of people are liking that. I think a lot of employers are liking that too. So to be perfectly honest with you, Bat Taco franchise aside, my personal life is not too terribly different. I might point out that as a member of the news media, I am exempted from the safer at home lockdown. I'm not making this up. I looked at Mayor Garcetti's proclamation and the exempt businesses, and among them were media personalities, including podcasters. Now, as I've said many times before in the last 2 weeks, I've got to keep my remarks relatively brief because I have to be prepared at any moment for the national command structure to give me a call, and there may be an urgent need for a podcast without much warning, so I have to kind of be ready on the go. But on a personal level, my life's not really too different. A lot of time I spend in terms of recreation, I spend with online computer games. I have online communities, and I suspect that on a personal level, we're going to get a lot closer to our online friends than we have been. That this is going to become a little bit more of the new normal than our work colleagues, which are the people we see most on a daily basis. It's not going to happen overnight, but the information age is definitely putting us in that direction. As far as the country's concerned, I think the thing that's most striking to me, I think actually by far most striking to me, is how much good can be accomplished if you have enough of a crisis to simply eliminate unnecessary red tape. It's just astonishing how much can get done if you would just cut all this kudzu away. And I think that the challenge for us that I would like to see in terms of the country changing permanently is I'd like this virus to show us that there is a difference between necessary regulations and just plain ridiculous rules of bureaucratic red tape. I'd like, they sometimes we'll call a virus a wildfire that burns through a population. That's a pretty good analogy. And my hope is that this wildfire will burn off all of this dead brush that just keeps everybody from being able to move, all of these ridiculous, insane regulations. My show this week is about one of those. I think our experience with the FDA has been that it is in the bureaucratic mindset to follow the rules. That's their job. I don't blame them for that. But when you hear people saying, yes, this hydrochloroquine, which is showing tremendous effect, we might be able to have that tested in a year or two. No. To the degree that we can eliminate regulations, I would say some of them, like airline maintenance regulations, need to remain in place. And there is a role for the Food and Drug Administration. I like the idea that I can go into a supermarket, buy something and eat it, and not have to worry about it. I think that's appropriate. Yeah. But to the degree that these things exist to protect us from ourselves, I'd like to think that that this virus will slap enough adult into us so that we will be able to continue going forward with the idea that I am willing to take the risk and I'm willing to write my name on a piece of paper to indemnify people in cases of things like medicines or technologies or so on. I'm hoping that the long-term effects will be that somebody may say there's a drug that treats this, but it's not going to be approved by the FDA for 2 years. I'm hoping that the effect of this will be, well, tell me about the side effects. Tell me about the risk. Tell me about the success rate. Yeah, I'm in. And I will sign a piece of paper that will indemnify the manufacturer in case I decide to, start growing, reindeer antlers or whatever the side effects may be. And then I'll deal with it as an adult. If we can get most of this bureaucratic kudzu out of the way, that would be great. And I think the big takeaway from this pandemic is going to be just how fast the miracles of capitalism can blossom and bloom and get things where they need to be when these things are temporarily suspended. Perhaps we ought to take a look at permanently suspending some of these things.
Oh, absolutely. You call it kudzu, I call it regulatory cruft, but it's the same thing. It's just this built-up crud that we can't seem to get rid of. Yeah, I cleaned that up at the last moment for you, Bill.
Thank you.
I've been working at home, out of my home, for more than 20 years now, and I've always told myself that I really enjoy it. I like having my desk upstairs and my view of the woods and the mountain and all that. But now that it's enforced, I'm wondering if maybe I've been fooling myself to some degree. The fact that I can't get out makes me want to get out more than I ever have in the last 20 years or so. So I'm wondering, number one, when this is all over, if I'm going to make the effort that I feel now like I should make to get out more often. But if I do, and Bill is right about the way we'll work in the future, I'm going to finally get out there and I'm going to be the only one out. It's just going to be me. Too
My
late.
robotic head will be there on a drone.
Too late as always. So I do know that I'm going to give it a chance. I hope it's sooner rather than later. I think we all do. Also going forward, there are two changes I would really like to make, and they're sort of related. One is, everybody's got these crushing bills right now as work dries up and paychecks stop arriving. And we have too much credit. We have too much debt. A house, sure. A car, maybe. But this idea of credit card living and having that hanging over your head in the time of a crisis makes everything worse. I think one of the reasons that the panic is so real, so visceral, is this idea of I'm going to lose it all because I can't make the credit card payment next month or whatever it is. But this idea of putting everything on the card, I think we need to rethink that as a country. And the other is, and this involves China to a degree, it's this idea of consumer goods that are largely disposable. Now, I'm not talking about electronics. Everyone's going to want a new smartphone every couple of years because they just get that much better. That sort of thing is fine. But to give you just a real life example, I started buying Levi 501s when I was back in high school, and I think they cost me about $25 a pair, and I usually get 10 or 12 years out of these things, wearing them once or twice a week. Well, now they're made in China or Vietnam or somewhere else. The price, adjusting for inflation, is actually less than it was back in the 80s when I started buying these things. And I'm lucky if I get 2 or 3 years out of them wearing them once or twice a week. And I would not mind paying more for consumer products, whether it's jeans or razors or whatever it happens to be, that last. And I don't think we're going to get that kind of quality control out of China. We certainly haven't so far. The idea of paying more up front, paying cash, and keeping things longer. I'm not some crazy environmentalist trying to save the planet from this. I'm trying to be a smart consumer. If it's good for the planet too, well, that'll be fine. And hopefully we won't get sick worrying about it. And that is your right angle on that, brought to you by the members of BillWhittle.com. Remember, content like this needs sponsors like you. So if you aren't a member yet, what are you waiting for? Click on over. Come on board. We'd love to have you here. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.